My name is Marcus Thornhill. I'm 27, the youngest major and company commander in the whole damn brigade. I came back from a hellish tour in Kandahar, still smelling of dust and cordite. When I pushed open the door to our little house at Fort Bragg, I wasn't greeted by the smell of a home-cooked meal, but by the sight of a military-issued duffel bag stuffed to the breaking point. Victoria had her back to me. She was carefully wrapping my most prized possession, the silver star I'd earned dragging 2 of my men out of a burning Humvee, in a silk handkerchief before placing it in the bag. The sound of the door latch clicking made her shoulders go rigid. She spun around, her face as white as the cheap paint on the walls. Marcus. What are you doing home today? The panic in her voice was unmistakable as she instinctively tried to hide the duffel bag behind her back. My eyes swept past her and landed on the bag. It was standard issue, my name and serial number stenciled on the side, and I knew what was inside, every dollar I'd saved from my combat pay, my grandfather's watch, and the one thing that meant more to me than my own life, my honor, pinned to a piece of ribbon. What's all this? My voice was dangerously calm. On the inside, a fire was raging hot enough to melt steel. Victoria's eyes wouldn't meet mine. Her lips quivered as she stammered, It's nothing. I was just cleaning things up. Cleaning things up. I took a step forward, my shadow falling over her. Packing up my medal and every cent I own. Who's it for, Victoria? We'd been married 3 years, and she'd never looked at me with that expression before. It was a toxic cocktail of guilt, shame, and a flicker of resentment at being caught. Don't be ridiculous, Marcus, her voice shot up as if the volume could somehow prove her innocence. I was just going to send some things to my parents to show them how well you're doing. Is that right? I reached out, my movement swift and non-negotiable, and took the bag from her. I unzipped it and pulled out an unsealed envelope. Inside, her elegant cursive flowed across the page, each word a needle in my heart. Damien, my love, I know it must be getting cold in New York. You're not meant for that kind of struggle. I've sent you some money to help you get by. I also included Marcus's medal. Maybe showing it to the right people at the fellowship committee will help them see the kind of character you have, the sacrifices you're connected to. It could be the thing that gets you the artist-in-residence spot. Don't worry about me. I'm fine, but God, I miss you. It was signed simply Damien. Damien Ashford, her college boyfriend, the poet she'd never quite gotten over. For 7 years I'd faced down death without flinching, but standing there in my own living room reading that letter, a chill went through me that no desert night could match. I slammed the letter down on the table. The sharp crack made a coffee mug jump. You call this sending things to your parents? The dam broke. Tears streamed down her face as she grabbed my arm. Marcus, please let me explain. Damien, he's falling apart. He's a brilliant artist. He can't be left to starve in some Brooklyn loft. I was just trying to help him. Help him. I yanked my arm away. I pointed a trembling finger at the metal peeking out of the handkerchief. With my money. My savings. With the goddamn medal my men bled for. You're going to use my honor to pave the way for your lover. Your honor is my honor. We're married, she cried. Married. The laugh that escaped my lips was harsh and bitter. Is that what this is? You at home secretly funding another man while telling me you're too fragile to start a family. For 3 years, every time I came home on leave, she'd put me off. Her health was too delicate, she'd say. The stress wasn't good for her. I believed her. I'd felt guilty for wanting a child, for putting any pressure on her. I sent my pay home so she could see the best doctors, eat well, rest. But just last month, I'd asked Nurse Patterson at the base clinic to check in on her. Patterson, a tough old bird who'd seen it all, had pulled me aside later. She told me Victoria was healthy as a horse. The look in her eyes told me everything else. She just warned me to keep my eyes open. Now they were wide open, and I finally saw everything. It wasn't that she couldn't, it was that she wouldn't. Not for me. Not for the soldier who came home with dirt under his nails and ghosts in his eyes. Victoria's sobs stopped cold. She stared at me, horrified that I knew. Marcus, did you have me investigated? Do I need to? I gestured to the letter. You laid your whole heart out for him. Did you think I was too stupid to read it? I looked at her tear-streaked face, a face I once thought was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Now it was the face of a stranger. I suddenly remembered how after we made love, she would always get up immediately to wash, her eyes holding a distance, a disdain I'd refused to see. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of my uniform, of the calluses on my hands, of the man I was. I had contaminated her pure artistic world. A wave of exhaustion deeper than any I'd felt on a 72-hour patrol washed over me. I fought for this home, for her. I thought I was protecting my world, only to find out my world had stabbed me in the back. Victoria, I said, taking a deep breath to steady my voice, I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. She just stared, tears frozen on her lashes, as if I'd told the sickest joke in the world. In her mind, Marcus Thornhill was so devoted, so blindly in love, that he would forgive anything. She thought I couldn't live without her. She didn't understand. When you've spent years looking death in the face, you learn that there are very few things in this world you can't let go of, especially a woman who never loved you in the first place. A divorce. Victoria shrieked, her voice turning sharp and ugly. Are you out of your mind, Marcus? Over this? Do you have any idea what a messy divorce will do to your career? She was right. For an officer on the fast track, a contentious divorce was a black mark, a potential career killer. It spoke of instability, of poor judgment. But her words unlocked a memory, our wedding. She was the sophisticated professor's daughter. I was the kid from a Rust Belt town who'd found his way out through the army. Everyone said I'd married up. I believed them. So I tolerated her moods, her distance. I'd showered her with a gentle affection she never returned. I thought, given enough time, I could earn her love. I'd been trying to warm a statue, a beautiful, cold statue whose heart was already in a museum somewhere else. I ignored her threat and calmly began unpacking the duffel bag, stacking my cash on the table. Then I picked up my silver star. I used the sleeve of my uniform to polish its surface, wiping away an invisible smudge. It was the second time I'd polished it. The first was right before the award ceremony, wanting it to gleam for the photo I'd sent home to her. This time I was wiping away her touch. That small, deliberate action seemed to terrify her more than my anger. She knew my tells. When I had to make a life-or-death decision, I would methodically clean my weapon, my knife, my medals. Marcus, don't do this. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Her tone softened as she reached for me. I'll never speak to Damien again. I swear. We can fix this. We can have a baby. Please. A baby. I met her eyes, my gaze as cold as a mountain peak. For who, Victoria? So he can have you as his mother and Damien as his long-distance spiritual father. I didn't know all the modern dating terms, but I knew what this was. An emotional affair? No, this was a complete and total betrayal. She was ready to ship her body, her soul, and my honor to him in a goddamn care package. How can you say that? She cried, stung. Damien and I are just soulmates. Soulmates. I snorted, placing the medal securely in the breast pocket of my jacket and buttoning it. Then what am I? The guy who pays the bills and wins the medals that you and your soulmate can use to build your perfect little life. I was never ashamed of you. You're a hero. I'm proud of you, she insisted. Don't be, I cut her off. That's a weight I can't have you carrying anymore. Save your pride for your poet. I walked into the bedroom and pulled my footlocker out from under the bed. I didn't have much, a few sets of uniforms, some field manuals, and a framed photo of my mom. Victoria followed me, her panic rising as she saw I was serious. Marcus, you can't leave. What will I do? What will people say? She grabbed the handle of the footlocker, holding on for dear life. You should have thought of that before you decided my silver star would look good on another man's resume, I said, prying her fingers off one by one. You're not worried about me or about this marriage. You're worried about losing the status of being a major's wife. Without my rank, she was just another woman working a part-time job at the university library. Would her circle of pseudo-intellectual friends still find her so interesting then? My words hit their mark. The color drained from her face and her hand fell away. Fine. Fine, Marcus Thornhill, she spat, backing away, her eyes filled with venom. You think you're so high and mighty. You think you'll find someone better. You're just a grunt from a dead-end town. Who else would have you? That's not your problem anymore. I closed the footlocker, stood up, and took one last look around a room that was never really a home. Our wedding photo hung on the wall. I was in my dress blues, grinning like an idiot. She wore a simple white dress, a polite, practiced smile on her lips, her eyes looking somewhere past the camera. I finally realized she was never even looking at me. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow, I said, walking past her without a second glance. At the front door, I paused but didn't turn around. You should know this about me, Victoria. I'm the kind of man who bleeds before he cries. I live on my feet and I'll die on my feet. I gave you everything I had, but if you don't want it, I won't force you to take it. I pulled the door open and walked out into the cool evening air. Behind me I heard a scream of rage and the sound of something shattering against the wall. I didn't break stride. The base was quiet. Neighbors had probably heard everything, but no one was opening their door. I squared my shoulders and walked away from that house like I was marching into battle. Tonight I'd crash in an empty bunk in the barracks. Tomorrow I was filing for divorce, and God himself couldn't stop me. Thornhill, have you lost your goddamn mind? In his office, Colonel Richardson slammed my divorce petition onto his desk. His salt and pepper mustache seemed to bristle with anger. You know you're up for promotion. This is the absolute worst time to pull a stunt like this. A scandal could derail everything we've planned for you. Is your career not important to you? I stood at attention, my gaze fixed on the American flag behind his desk. Sir, with all due respect, I'll choose my dignity over my career. Don't be a fool, the colonel said, his voice laced with disappointment. Marriage is tough. Victoria is an educated woman, a bit of a free spirit. You're a soldier, you're supposed to be able to handle adversity. You talk to her, you work it out. You don't just throw in the towel. In the military, especially for an officer, divorce was a huge red flag. If it got messy, I could be facing a conduct unbecoming charge, and my career would be over. Colonel, I said, my voice steady, if my wife were just unhappy, I'd spend the rest of my life trying to fix it. But she tried to use my medal, the one this army awarded me, as a bargaining chip to get her old boyfriend a leg up. That's not a marriage problem, sir. That's an attack on my integrity, on everything we stand for. My honor comes from this country and the men I serve with. I will not allow it to be used as a tool for some wannabe poet. My words hung in the air. Colonel Richardson stared at me, his expression shifting from anger to understanding. He'd seen men break over far less. He sighed heavily, opened a drawer, and pulled out a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. I know this is a tough pill to swallow, Marcus, he said, his tone softening as he poured. But you have to consider your part in this. You're gone for months at a time. Maybe she was just lonely. Lonely. A bitter laugh escaped me. Sir, I sent every spare dime I had home to her. On my last leave, I spent 2 days tracking down a first-edition book of poetry she wanted. I'm a grunt, sir. I don't know about sonnets and romance, but I know about loyalty. I gave her all the care I knew how to give, but her heart was already gone. I could have handed her the moon and she'd have complained it wasn't romantic enough. The colonel said nothing. We drank in silence. The news spread through the base like wildfire. Victoria began her campaign, telling anyone who would listen that the war had changed me, made me angry and violent, that I was abandoning her. She was smart, she never mentioned Damien or the medal. She just painted herself as the tragic, devoted wife of a damaged war hero. The whispers followed me everywhere. Did you hear about Major Thornhill and his wife? Such a shame. She's so refined. He's lucky she ever gave him the time of day. It's always the same story. Man gets a little power and he forgets where he came from. I was a pariah. Even the men in my own company looked at me differently. Victoria's parents drove down from Virginia, raising hell at the base commander's office, demanding I be disciplined and forced to reconcile. The pressure was immense. Victoria must have thought she had me cornered. She showed up at the barracks one evening, her eyes red and swollen, wearing a faded dress that made her look frail and pitiful. "Marcus, I'm begging you. Let's just drop this," she sobbed, clutching my arm. "Everyone is on my side. You can't win this fight. Just come home and we can pretend this never happened." Her words dripped with the confidence of a victor. She thought she could break me with gossip and public opinion. I looked at her and felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. "Victoria, do you really think everyone is as manipulative and dishonest as you are?" From under my pillow, I retrieved the letter she'd written, along with a photograph I'd found tucked inside one of her books. It was of her and Damien, their heads together, smiling more brightly than they ever had in our wedding photos. "Why do you think I haven't shown these to the colonel yet?" I held them up for her to see. "I was saving you the last of your dignity, but since you don't seem to want it, we can do this the official way." The blood drained from her face. She knew what this meant. "You wouldn't," she hissed. "Watch me," I said, putting the evidence away. "The base legal team will want to speak with you tomorrow. You can choose to sign the divorce papers and walk away with your reputation mostly intact, or you can force my hand and everyone will know exactly what you did. Then you'll be escorted off this base in disgrace." I turned my back on her, picked up a book, and pretended to read. Victoria stood there trembling like a leaf. She knew I wasn't bluffing. The army takes honor seriously. Her actions, if made public, were far more damaging than a simple divorce. Finally she spoke, her voice choked with hatred. "You're a bastard, Marcus Thornhill." Then she turned and fled. The next day, she formally admitted to a grave error in judgment, and signed the divorce papers. The day it was finalized, we stood outside the courthouse in silence. As I turned to leave, she said, "You'll regret this, Marcus. A cold, heartless man like you will never be happy." I didn't answer. I just stood a little taller and walked toward the sun. Regret? I don't do regret. Still, the day I signed my honorable discharge papers, there was a hollow feeling in my chest. To quell the scandal and give everyone a clean break, I'd requested a voluntary separation from the service. Colonel Richardson clapped me on the shoulder. "The army is losing a good man, Marcus." I shook my head. "No, sir. I just wasn't the right fit anymore, but I have no regrets about my service." With my discharge papers came a recommendation for a government job. I was made the deputy manager of a failing auto parts factory in Ohio. From commanding 150 elite soldiers to overseeing a few dozen union workers in a dying industry, the fall was steep. I didn't care. For me, leaving that house of lies, ending that suffocating marriage, that was my new beginning. Life at the factory was even slower than I'd imagined. The place was on life support, the workers just running out the clock until the inevitable shutdown. My job as deputy manager was a joke. I had no real authority. My daily routine consisted of reading the newspaper, drinking stale coffee, and mediating disputes over parking spots. In the army, my days were about training, strategy, life and death. Now they were about whether the cafeteria was serving meatloaf or fish sticks. The change was jarring. The quiet was deafening. The insomnia came back, worse than ever. I'd lie awake all night, the roar of helicopters and Victoria's final venomous words playing on a loop in my head. It was PTSD compounded by the divorce. I was nearing a breaking point. The VA doctors gave me pills, but they just made me feel numb. Then one day, I met Sophia Bennett. She was a new agricultural scientist, fresh out of UC Davis, assigned to the factory as part of some state-run program to find new uses for failing industrial sites. That afternoon she was kneeling by a small, neglected patch of dirt behind the main building, tending to a few struggling tomato plants. She wore faded blue overalls, her sleeves rolled up to reveal slender, dirt-smudged forearms. The sun lit up the fine hairs on her cheek, and her expression was so focused, so gentle, you'd think she was handling the crown jewels. On impulse, I walked over. "Finding any state secrets in there?" She jumped, startled. When she saw it was me, she scrambled to her feet, brushing the dirt from her hands. "Mr. Thornhill, sir." A faint blush colored her cheeks, reminding me of the half-ripe tomatoes at her feet. "It's Marcus," I said, softening my voice. "Are you gardening?" "Yes," she said, a little shy. This patch wasn't being used, so I thought I'd try something. These are a new hybrid tomato strain from the university lab. I wanted to see if they could grow in this soil. I looked at the sad little plants. Soil's too compacted, I said without thinking. You need to work in some sand, maybe some ash from the incinerator. Loosen it up. It was something my dad had taught me as a kid, back when our yard was more vegetable patch than lawn. Sophia's eyes lit up. You know about soil composition? A little. From that day on, we had something to talk about. After my shift, I'd find myself wandering over to her little garden. I'd help her turn the soil or rig up a simple irrigation system. She'd tell me about her classes, about things like photosynthesis and genetic modification. Her voice was calm and steady, like a gentle rain, and it washed away some of the grit I carried inside me. Being around her, the tightly coiled spring in my chest would slowly unwind. I started sleeping again, just an hour or two at first, but it felt like a miracle. She seemed to sense I was struggling, though she never pried. Her concern was quiet, practical. Marcus, you look tired. Are you eating properly? I brought in some extra chamomile tea from my garden. It helps you relax. My grandmother swears by tart cherry juice for sleep. I left a bottle on your desk. She never asked about my past, never mentioned the rumors that must have followed me from the army. Her kindness was like the afternoon sun, warm, steady, and asking for nothing in return. One evening, as we were staking her now thriving bean plants, she said, her eyes on a newly formed bean pod, I heard you were a hero in the war. My gut clenched. My hand tightened on the wooden stake. She didn't look at me. She just gently touched a leaf. I think anyone who can walk through that kind of fire and come out the other side is the bravest kind of person there is. There's nothing you can't overcome. Her words were so simple, so direct, but they landed like a depth charge in the stagnant water of my soul. She wasn't offering pity. She was offering respect. I looked at her profile, silhouetted against the setting sun, and felt a thawing in a part of my heart I thought had frozen solid. That night, I dreamt for the first time in years. There was no sand, no gunfire, just a green, thriving garden and Sophia turning to smile at me with her clear, bright eyes. I decided then and there I was going to start living again, for myself and for this unexpected ray of light. Things started to change fast. With Sophia's quiet support, the worst of the insomnia faded. I started thinking about the future again. This factory was a dead end. The world was changing. The internet was just starting to boom. Tech startups were popping up in California and Austin. The papers were full of stories about guys in their garages becoming millionaires. The soldier in me, the part that thrived on risk and strategy, woke up. I'd rather go down swinging than rust away here. I started using my vacation time to fly out to Austin. It was a chaotic, energetic city, the new frontier. I told everyone at the factory I was visiting an old army buddy. No one cared. Only Sophia knew I was scouting for opportunities. Before I left for my first trip, she pressed a paper bag into my hands. Inside were 2 homemade granola bars and a thermos of coffee. For the road, Marcus, she said, her head down. It's a long flight. The warmth of the thermos spread through my hands into my chest. This is what it felt like to have someone in your corner. Sophia, I said, using her first name so directly for the first time. Wait for me. She looked up, her eyes shining, and nodded fiercely. Austin was a whirlwind. It was hard, and I was out of my element, but it was electric, full of opportunity. I linked up with a former sergeant from my unit who had started a small logistics company, basically running deliveries for the new tech companies that were popping up everywhere. I slept on his couch, ate cheap tacos, and worked 18-hour days learning the business from the ground up. I drove trucks, negotiated with suppliers, and learned to read a balance sheet. Whenever I felt like I was in over my head, I'd think of Sophia's calm, steady eyes and her words, "There's nothing you can't overcome." After 3 months, I was leaner, tanner, and had a check in my pocket for $50,000, my share of a huge contract we'd landed. In the early 2000s, it felt like all the money in the world. I flew back to Ohio and handed in my resignation. My boss looked at me like I had 2 heads. Giving up a stable government job to become a delivery guy was insane to him. I didn't bother explaining. I went to find Sophia. I placed a small, elegantly wrapped box on the table in front of her. Inside was a simple silver bracelet and a new fountain pen for her to write her research notes. "Sophia, I quit my job," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I'm starting my own company, a logistics firm. It's a huge risk. I need someone to help me run it, someone to keep the books, someone I can trust. Will you take a crazy risk with me?" It was the clumsiest proposal in history. Sophia's face flushed a brilliant red. She looked down at her hands, twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. My heart hammered against my ribs. She was a brilliant scientist with a bright future. I was an unemployed vet with a crazy dream. "It's okay if you don't want to," I started to say. I shouldn't have asked. "I do." The two words were so quiet I almost missed them. She looked up, her eyes wet but shining with a fierce light. "Yes, Marcus. I do. A crazy risk. I'd follow you into a hurricane if you asked me to." At that moment, I, who had never shed a tear on the battlefield, felt my eyes burn. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm and strong. This time, I knew I was holding my future. Just as Sophia and I were planning our trip to the courthouse, I heard news about Victoria. It came from an old army buddy who'd taken a job in D.C. He told me Victoria had gotten her wish, she'd married her poet, Damien Ashford. He had, through some connection she greased, gotten that prestigious artist-in-residence fellowship. But after the year was up, the real world hit. He couldn't hold a steady job, drifting between adjunct teaching gigs and freelance writing, producing little of substance. They lived in a cramped rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, barely scraping by. The brilliant artist who was above worldly concerns turned out to be just another man who couldn't handle failure. My friend said they fought constantly, mostly about money, my buddy said, slapping me on the back. "You dodged a bullet, man. That woman would have dragged you down to hell with her." I listened, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Her life was her own. It had nothing to do with me anymore. All I could see, all I could think about, was the smart, brave woman who was willing to risk everything on a crazy dream with me. Our wedding was simple. We got married at the courthouse and had a backyard barbecue at the small house we were renting. I invited my old squad and a few friends from the factory. Sophia wore a simple red sundress I'd bought for her. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She moved among my rough-around-the-edges army buddies with a natural grace, making them feel welcome. I could see the approval in their eyes. My old sergeant, now my business partner, pulled me aside, his face flushed from beer. "Marcus, you lucky son of a, that one's a keeper, a real partner." Not like, he trailed off, but I knew what he meant. I smiled and pulled Sophia closer, my hand firmly in hers. My luck had finally turned. That night, in the small bedroom of our new home, Sophia seemed nervous. I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. "Thank you, Sophia." "For what?" she whispered. "For betting on me, a broken-down soldier with nothing to his name." She turned in my arms and cupped my face with her hands, her gaze serious and unwavering. "You're not broken, Marcus. You're the strongest man I've ever met. You're my hero." That night, we were truly husband and wife. I had never known a feeling like it, a connection so deep it felt like two halves of a soul clicking into place. I finally understood what a home was. It wasn't four walls. It was the person you shared them with. After the wedding, our business took off. I bought our first truck, a used Freightliner with the last of my money. I hit the road, driving the long-haul routes myself, building a reputation for being reliable and on time. Sophia, with her sharp mind, handled the logistics, the accounting, and customer relations from our spare bedroom-turned-office. It was hard. I was gone for weeks at a time, living on truck stop coffee and greasy burgers. Sophia was home alone, managing a growing business and turning our little rental into a real home. But neither of us ever complained. We were building something together. 6 months later, Sophia met me at the door with a shy, nervous smile. She told me she was pregnant. I was standing in the doorway, covered in road dust. I froze for a full 30 seconds. Then I dropped my duffel bag, swept her up in my arms, and spun her around the living room until we were both dizzy. "I'm going to be a dad. I'm going to be a dad," I yelled, laughing like a madman. My own child. My legacy. From that day on, she wasn't allowed to lift anything heavier than a book. I hired a neighbor to help with the cleaning. Every time I came home, my truck was loaded with whatever she was craving: pickles, ice cream, spicy chili from a diner 2 states away. Watching her belly grow, I felt my own heart swell to match. The day she went into labor, my truck broke down on I-80 in the middle of Nebraska. I was frantic. I ended up hitching a ride with the trucker the rest of the way, arriving at the hospital just as the sun was coming up. I sprinted down the hallway of the maternity ward and heard it, the loud, lusty cry of a newborn baby. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. A nurse came out holding a tightly wrapped bundle. "Congratulations, Mr. Thornhill. You have a son. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. With trembling hands, I took the tiny, warm body into my arms. He was perfect. I walked into the recovery room. Sophia was pale and exhausted, but she gave me a radiant smile. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You did it, Sophia. Thank you. He's beautiful. What should we name him?" she whispered, her eyes on our son. I looked down at the new life in my arms. "Ethan," I said. "Ethan Thornhill. A good, strong name." "Ethan," she repeated, a contented smile on her face. "I love it." I sat by her bedside all night, holding my son, watching over my wife. As dawn broke, a profound sense of peace settled over me. My life had truly begun. The birth of my son was the start of a golden era for the Thornhill family. My logistics company, Thornhill Freight, grew as rapidly as he did. As e-commerce exploded, so did the need to move goods across the country. My fleet expanded from 1 beat-up rig to 3, then 10, then 100. I built a team of the best, most reliable drivers I could find, mostly other veterans. They called me boss, but I preferred it when they called me major. Sophia, meanwhile, had gone back to school at night, earning an MBA. She became the CFO of our company, the strategic mind behind my operational grit. We were a formidable team. We moved out of the little rental and built our dream house on a few acres of land outside the city. Our family grew. A few years after Ethan, our daughter Lily was born. She had my eyes and her mother's smile. I was wrapped around her little finger from day one. A couple of years after that, Sophia surprised me with the news that we were having twins, 2 more boys. We named them Noah and Grayson. Our house, once quiet, was now filled with the chaos and laughter of 4 children. Coming home to them tackling me at the door, to the sight of Sophia smiling at me from the kitchen, made me feel like the richest man on earth. I raised my kids the way I'd led my men, with discipline, with expectations of honesty and hard work. But I also gave them something I'd never been good at before: open, unconditional love. Sophia was their cultural and intellectual center. She read to them, helped them with their homework, and nurtured their individual passions. And they thrived. Ethan, my oldest, was a born engineer, fascinated by the engines of my trucks. Lily, my little girl, was sharp as a tack. She'd ignore her dolls to read the business section of the newspaper over my shoulder. The twins were night and day. Noah was quiet and methodical, with a mind for rules and logic. Grayson was a bundle of kinetic energy, always running, jumping, and climbing. Looking at my 4 incredible children, I would often think about what my life would be if I'd stayed with Victoria. I'd probably still be at that factory, or one like it, bitter and unfulfilled, listening to her complain about her wasted potential and the genius of her long-lost Damien. We almost certainly would never have had children. And if by some miracle we had, what kind of life would they have had in a house so full of resentment? Thank God I made the right choice. Life can be a minefield. Making a wrong step is easy. The hard part, the brave part, is realizing you're on the wrong path and having the courage to turn back. Time flies when you're building a life. Before I knew it, it was the late 2010s. Thornhill Freight was one of the largest privately owned logistics companies in the Midwest. I was no longer a hustler, but a respected businessman, a pillar of the community. And Victoria? Her life had taken a very different path. I still heard bits and pieces from my buddy in D.C. He seemed to take a grim pleasure in reporting her downfall. Damien Ashford, the poet, never wrote his masterpiece. He soured, blaming the world for his failure. He started drinking heavily. Without a stable income, they lost their apartment in Brooklyn and ended up in a rundown tenement in Queens. Victoria, the professor's daughter who once debated art and philosophy, was working as a cashier at a grocery store to pay the bills. The fighting, my friend said, was legendary in their building. The worst was when Damien took their grocery money and spent it on a rare vintage bottle of scotch. Victoria reportedly screamed at him, "My first husband was 10 times the man you are. At least he was good for something." That was the first time Damien hit her. It wasn't the last. Colleagues at her store would see the bruises. They'd urge her to leave, but she'd just cry and say, "Where would I go? Who would want a washed-up, childless woman like me?" She had forgotten, it seemed, that she was the one who had demanded to be set free. My friend recounted these stories with a kind of righteous satisfaction, but I felt nothing. No joy in her misery. She was a ghost from a past life. Her misfortunes were the consequences of her own choices. My life, my focus, was here, my wife, my children, my business. One afternoon, I was driving my new Lincoln Navigator to pick up Lily from her SAT prep class. As I waited at a red light, I glanced out the window and saw her, a woman with brittle, graying hair and a deeply lined face, wearing a thin, worn-out coat. She was hurrying along the sidewalk, clutching a plastic grocery bag. It was Victoria. She looked 20 years older than her age. The light in her eyes long since extinguished. She never saw me. Her gaze was fixed on the cracked pavement in front of her. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator and the powerful, quiet engine pulled me forward. In my rearview mirror, her figure grew smaller and smaller until she was gone. A chapter finally and completely closed. The years spun on. My children grew into remarkable adults, each my proudest achievement. Ethan, my eldest, didn't join the family business. He got a degree in mechanical engineering from MIT and became a lead designer for a major American electric vehicle company. He was helping to build the future of transportation. When I saw him on stage at auto shows, confidently explaining his designs, my heart swelled with a pride that no business deal could ever match. Lily, my only daughter, inherited my head for business and her mother's strategic mind. After getting her MBA from Wharton, she didn't come to work for me. She started her own venture capital firm. They called her the Queen of the Pitch on Wall Street. In 5 years, she'd built an empire that was starting to eclipse my own. She was a force of nature. Noah, the quiet twin, went to Georgetown Law and became one of the top corporate lawyers in the country. He was sharp, ethical, and unshakable. He was the legal counsel for both my company and Lily's. With him watching our backs, we never made a bad deal. And Grayson, my wild child, channeled all his energy into athletics. He became a decathlete, representing Team USA at 2 Olympic Games. The wall in our den was covered with his medals. Seeing him on the podium, hand over his heart as the national anthem played, was one of the single greatest moments of my life. A lead engineer, a Wall Street titan, a legal shark, and an Olympian, my 4 children, my legacy. People always told me that my greatest success wasn't Thornhill Freight, but them. They were right. And the architect of it all was my wife, Sophia. She was the bedrock of our family. She managed our home, nurtured our children, and stood by my side through every storm and every victory. She was my quiet counsel and my greatest cheerleader. Our hair is gray now, but when we walk down the street, I still reach for her hand. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow-growing oak, strong and deep-rooted. Today was my 70th birthday. The kids had all come home to throw a party for me at the house. Ethan was here with his wife and my grandson, a boisterous 5-year-old who called me Grandpa Marcus. Lily brought her fiancé, a brilliant young tech CEO. Noah and Grayson were arguing playfully over who gave me the better gift, a rare bottle of Pappy Van Winkle or front-row tickets to the Super Bowl. Our family, 3 generations, filled the house with life and laughter. I looked at all of them, and my beautiful Sophia, still radiant after all these years, and raised my glass. My eyes were misty. "A toast," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "To my wife, Sophia. Without her, none of this, none of us, would be here. She is the best decision I ever made. Sophia blushed like she was 20 again. The kids all cheered. To Mom. Watching them, my heart was full to bursting. It's true what they say, in life, the choices you make are everything. Choose the right person, and the rest of the journey is a joy. After the party, life settled back into its comfortable rhythm. I was officially retired. Lily and a board of directors ran the company now. Sophia and I spent our days gardening, traveling, and spoiling our grandson. One afternoon, as we were pruning our rose bushes, the doorbell rang. Our housekeeper answered it. A moment later, she led a frail, elderly woman into the backyard. The woman's clothes were threadbare but clean, her hair thin and completely white. She looked around nervously, clutching a worn handbag. It took me a full minute to recognize her. Victoria. Sophia sensed the tension immediately. She touched my arm gently. Marcus, I'll be inside if you need me. She gave Victoria a polite nod and left us alone. Victoria stood there, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands shaking. She looked nothing like the proud, beautiful woman who once looked down on me. Life had broken her completely. Marcus, her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry to intrude. I didn't know where else to go. I said nothing. I just waited. Damien died 3 months ago, she said, her voice cracking. Liver failure. He drank himself to death. I have nothing. No pension, no savings, no family. My parents passed away years ago, ashamed of what I'd become. Tears streamed down her weathered face. I saw your story in the business journal. You're so successful. Your family is so beautiful. I thought maybe. She couldn't finish. She just stood there, a broken shell of a person, silently begging. I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me, the part that still remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, wanted to tell her to leave, to taste the same rejection she'd served me. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd spent decades building a life of integrity, teaching my children about compassion and strength. Victoria, I said quietly, I'm not going to pretend we're friends. What you did nearly destroyed me. But I'm not going to let you starve either. I pulled out my phone and made a call to Noah. 20 minutes later, he had arranged for her to be placed in a modest but comfortable assisted living facility. The company would cover her expenses. She would have a roof over her head, 3 meals a day, and medical care. It's not charity, I told her as the car arrived to take her to the facility. Consider it the severance package you never got from our marriage. Victoria looked at me with hollow, grateful eyes. Thank you, Marcus. You're a better man than I ever deserved. You're right about that, I said without malice. But this isn't for you. It's for the man I want to be, the man my wife and children know me as. As her car pulled away, Sophia came out and stood beside me. She slipped her hand into mine. You did the right thing, she said softly. I know, I replied, pulling her close. Because the right thing isn't always about what they deserve. It's about who we choose to be. That night, lying in bed with Sophia's head on my chest, I thought about the strange, winding road my life had taken. From that betrayal in a cramped military house to this moment of peace in a home filled with love, every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of courage had led me here. Victoria had chosen her poet and her illusions. I had chosen my dignity and my future. She ended up alone and broken. I ended up surrounded by love and legacy. Life, I realized, is the ultimate ledger. It balances itself eventually. You just have to be patient enough to see it through. As I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was simple and profound: I had won. Not because she had lost, but because I had built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.